David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
We have just 8 days to go until the 2020 election, and the election is essentially a baked cake at this point in time with just days remaining. The two candidates couldn't be more different. The number of undecideds is relatively small. We know the top issues to voters are coronavirus, the economy, and the race-related protests that we've seen over the last several months, followed by healthcare and a number of other different issues. And I do think it's important just to remember that this is a unique election. The circumstances are particularly different. We're in the middle of a 100-year pandemic. We've got the most incompetent president that we've ever had, and that there are really important issues that neither candidate is talking about and that are rarely talked about in many presidential elections. But we need to remember this large swath of important issues that if Joe Biden were to win, we are going to need to get right back to shining a spotlight on. Now, the point of doing this segment is not to attack either candidate per se. It is a reminder about circumstances. This is not about who we should vote for. Obviously, for the sake of humanity and the future of the country, we must vote for Joe Biden. But all of that being said, there has been no substantive discussion about, as an example, labor unions and the democratization of the workplace. There's been no substantive discussion about tech monopolies outside of Donald Trump complaining about how Twitter and Google treat him unfairly. No discussion of the massive change to our economy that has happened and is happening, which means quite simply that a ton of those manufacturing jobs are never coming back because they don't exist. These aren't trivial things, and they go to the core of how our country has changed and potentially could change depending on who we elect. And the reason it's crucial that we talk about this is that someday the pandemic will be over. Someday, hopefully, there will be a reasonable person in the Oval Office again. Hopefully, the latter will happen in January. And we're going to need to be ready to get back to the serious work on issues that are sort of higher on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, for lack of a better term. I'll get back to that idea, but let's go through the issues. Back in 2016, I talked about this, and it's happening again, which is that neither candidate will just come out and say, a lot of the manufacturing jobs are never coming back. Many of the jobs just don't exist anymore because they've been replaced by technology. Others aren't going to come back unless we change our economy so drastically that labor is as cheap here as it is in Bangladesh and China and other countries. And of course, our economy is based on the labor being cheaper there than here. So if we don't reorganize the economy and keep pretending that it's just a battle over who can bring those jobs back, we're in a fantasy world. That has to be dealt with. Neither Trump nor Hillary would say it in 2016. They would both say, I'll bring the jobs back. No, I'll bring the jobs back, because it's not politically advantageous to admit many of the jobs aren't coming back no matter who we elect. If you say it, your opponent says that's a defeatist attitude. And it's happening again this election. Until we recognize and admit that, we won't move on in terms of figuring out, okay, given that many of those jobs aren't coming back, how do we organize, structure, and supplement our economy? Biden has done a little bit of it by saying this isn't about saving jobs in a dying industry like coal. It's about creating new industries altogether, like green energy jobs. But both candidates are very lacking on that issue. Labor unions and democratizing the workplace. Neither candidate is saying a word about it other than claiming, I have the support of the unions. Joe Biden has actually been okay on this issue at times in his career. Big Amtrak guy, which is a union represented organization. But looking at the industries where workers are most vulnerable and figuring out how do we increase union representation? How do we change the fundamental dynamics of the relationships between corporations and workers to be more like the countries that don't need as strong of a union presence because they've dealt with the issues that unions are often there to deal with? talking about employee representation on company boards, dealing with stock repurchasing, which just helps shareholders and executives. If this all sounds weird, it's because neither candidate talks about it for a combination of reasons. Trump doesn't talk about it because he doesn't support any of this stuff. Biden, again, may support some of it. His historical views on Amtrak suggest that he does, but he's not talking about it, maybe because we have a five-alarm fire when it comes to coronavirus and the economy. Maybe it's because he's decided it's not to his advantage. But either way, we have to get back to that once sanity returns. And then number 3, tech monopolies. Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders did talk about it. Andrew Yang talked about it with regard to our data, but we're not hearing about it from Trump nor Biden. Trump sort of will dance around it when he's mad at tech companies, which he says are far left and are being unfair to him. It's totally self-serving. It's not actually being dealt with as an issue. And Joe Biden's not really talking about it either in a prominent way. And by the way, the debate moderators haven't brought up these issues either. So we can say that there's a lot of blame to go around here. So the point is not to say that I have any doubt about who we should vote for on Tuesday or now, if you're voting now. It's obviously Joe Biden. And to some degree, we have an emergency like coronavirus. And so it's natural that some of these issues would fall back. If we go to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if our basic needs of safety, security, and health aren't met, it's less likely we're going to get into tech monopolies. And I understand that. But we must remember that there are major political issues missing from the campaign right now. We can say they're missing because of coronavirus. We can say they're missing because Trump is such a dumpster fire that until he's removed, we can't deal with them. And that's fine. But we need a plan for when we get the ball back. As I've been saying, Biden winning is getting the ball back. We're not scoring points. We're just getting the opportunity to play offense again. We need to be ready to do it, particularly since there may be a 2-year window of Senate and House control, which will then be replaced by Republicans taking control back of either or both the House and Senate. So very important that we bear this in mind. Okay, we now have just 1 week and 1 day from the election, 3 different models to look at. Every model says the same thing. And people emailed me over the weekend saying, David, you've got to comment on these models because is there any case to be made for anything other than Biden crushing Trump? So let's look at the models. And yes, every single one of these says Joe Biden's doing really well. The first model is the 538 model, which currently says that Joe Biden has an 87% chance to win, while Trump has a 12% chance to win, with a 1% chance that neither candidate gets to 270 electoral votes. This means if you run 100 simulations with the current polling inputs and you adjust for margin for error, Biden would win in 87 simulations and Trump would win in 12. If you look at the electoral vote projections of 538, Joe Biden, they believe, will end up with 345 electoral votes, Trump with not even 200. That would be a very solid win for Joe. And then lastly, looking at popular vote predictions, 538 estimates that Biden will win about 53% of the popular vote with a roughly 8-point margin. That would be the largest popular vote victory in a very long time. And then if you look at the model from The Economist, The Economist's estimate is that Joe Biden has a 95% chance to win the electoral vote. In terms of the popular vote, The Economist says Biden has a greater than 99% chance of winning the popular vote and cites some popular, or rather electoral vote numbers, which give a possibility that Trump wins, but overwhelmingly skew to Joe Biden in terms of the Electoral College. As far as their best guess on electoral numbers, it's not a range here, but a best guess. The Economist believes that it will be Biden 352 and Trump 186, which also would be a huge win for Joe Biden. And then lastly, in terms of the electoral vote trends, The Economist has seen Biden's expected electoral votes rising for the last roughly 2 months since the start of September. And then we've got the Princeton model run by Sam Wang. The estimate is Biden 360 electoral votes, with the Senate going to Democrats 52 to 48 and Democrats keeping control of the House. So what's the counter to all this? Because it all just looks so great, right? Record early voting, more Democrats than Republicans in some states. It just looks great. Well, the counterpoints are, number one, none of this can account for voter suppression, and that could be a big factor, period. Don't even need to say more. That's just huge by itself. Number two, the polling looking at people who have not yet voted but are likely to vote is overwhelmingly in favor of Trump in some of these battleground states, suggesting that, yes, the early voting may well favor Biden in some of these key states, but the people who will vote on election day may heavily favor Donald Trump. So what can we do? All we can do is vote. You know it. I know it. We've got 8 days to go. Let me know your voting plan. I'm on Twitter at @dpackman, and we will have much more on this coming up a little bit later in the show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
We now have seen the full 60-minute interview, out of which Donald Trump abruptly walked last week, and it's as embarrassing as it is hilarious. It's as dystopian as it is preposterous, and we're going to look at it. This is the interview that took place a few days ago. Last week, Leslie Stahl was interviewing Donald Trump at the White House for last night's 60 Minutes episode, and Trump abruptly walked out early, threatened to release an uncut version of the interview, and did so, proving nothing other than he's a moron. Now we have a full, proper airing from 60 Minutes, and I want to get right into it. In this first clip, Donald Trump just whines. There's no other way to say it. He whines like he's an underprivileged, oppressed person rather than the most powerful person in the world. He whines about how Joe Biden doesn't get interview questions that Trump wants him to get. And then this is really wild. Trump brings up Obama spied on me, and you don't talk about it, Leslie. And Leslie Stahl explains we can't air stuff that we can't find evidence for, and it gets ugly and it gets hilarious.
I wish you would interview Joe Biden like you interview me. It would be so good. You know what?
You like this, I thought. I thought you liked
it. I don't mind it. But when I watch him walk out of a store, and he's walking with an ice cream, and the question the media asks him, what kind of ice cream, what flavor ice cream do you have? And he's in the midst of a scandal.
He's not.
And he's taking,
he's
of course
not.
he is,
No.
Leslie.
Come on.
Of course he is. It's the biggest, second biggest scandal.
So,
the biggest scandal was when they spied on my campaign. They spied on my campaign,
there's
Leslie.
no real evidence of that.
Of course there is.
No.
It's all over the place. Leslie,
Sir,
they spied on my campaign and they got caught.
Can I say something? You know, this is 60 Minutes. And we can't put on things we can't verify.
You won't put it on because it's bad for Biden.
We can't
Look,
put on things we can't verify.
Leslie, they spied on my campaign.
Well, we can't verify
It's been totally
that.
verified.
No.
It's been, just go down and get the papers. They spied on my campaign, they got caught.
No.
And then they went much further than that, and they got caught. And you will see that, Leslie, and you know that, but you just don't want to put it on the air.
As a matter of fact, I don't know that.
Okay.
Now, what I wish Leslie Stahl would have asked is, Mr. President, sir, as he likes to say, I will look into this Obama-Biden crime if you can tell me what law you believe was broken, what crime was actually committed here, because Trump doesn't know. Trump is lost in his own conspiracy theory. We've seen it before when he's actually asked, what are you alleging? He says, come on, you know what it is, unless you're part of the fake news covering it up. Pathetic. Trump, and remember, Trump thinks this interview makes him look good. That's one of the most delusional parts of this. Trump then asked whether insulting people on Twitter is a good idea. Trump says it is. But the most notable thing here is Trump complains more that Leslie Stahl's questions are inappropriate, and again complains about the questions given to Joe Biden. And then he just gets up and leaves.
Do you think that your tweets and your name calling are turning people off?
No, I think I wouldn't be here if I didn't have social media.
Well,
But the media is fake. And frankly, if I didn't have social media, I'd have no way of getting out my voice.
Do you know what you told me a long time ago when I asked why you keep saying fake media?
Yeah.
You said to me, I say that because I need to discredit you so that when you say negative things about me, no one will believe you.
I don't have to discredit you.
But that's what you told me.
You've discredited yourself.
You know, I didn't want to have this kind of angry...
Of course you did.
No, I didn't.
Of course you did.
No, I didn't.
Well, then you brought up a lot of subjects that
Well, I said
were
I'm going to ask you
inappropriately brought
tough
up.
questions.
They were inappropriately brought up right from the beginning. No, your first question was, this is going to be tough questions.
Why?
You don't ask Joe Biden. I saw your interview with Joe, the interview with Joe Biden.
I never did a Joe Biden interview.
The interview, 60 Minutes. I see Joe Biden giving softball after softball. I've seen all of his interviews. He's never been asked a question that's hard.
Okay, but forget him for a minute.
No, but you
You're
start
president,
with me.
You're president. And
Excuse me, Leslie, you started with me. Your first statement was, are you ready for tough questions?
Are you?
That's no way to talk. It's no way to talk.
Leslie, one second.
At this point, one of our producers interrupted to advise about the time remaining in the interview.
I think we have enough of an interview here, Hope. Okay, that's enough. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go meet for 2 seconds, okay? Thanks. I'll see you in a little while. Thanks.
Be careful.
Can you imagine a more whiny president? Whine, whine, whine. And then I think we have enough, he says. I think we have enough. Bye-bye. Here's the moment where Trump actually does the walking out, and Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany comes in with that oversized book. And it's just total cringe. I would be ashamed to be Kayleigh McEnany. She deserves never to work again after this nightmare is over. There's actually a long list of people associated with this clown that deserve to never work again. But I mean, this is just, if you're allergic to cringe, I would probably turn away at this point.
We were scheduled to take a walk with the president around the White House grounds.
I've got a lot of questions I didn't ask.
While we waited to see if the president was coming back,
Rich?
his press secretary, Kayleigh McEnany, came in with a hand delivery.
Leslie, the president wanted me to deliver his health care plan. It's a little heavy.
Oh my God, this is his health care plan.
Yes.
Okay, Kayleigh, thank you.
You're welcome, and the vice president will be with you shortly.
Okay. And the president's not coming back?
The president's giving you a lot of time.
It was heavy, filled with
look at this.
executive orders, congressional
can't lift
initiatives,
it.
but no comprehensive health plan.
So not all the pages were blank. There was actually some stuff in there, meaningless stuff. And as Leslie Stahl points out, nothing in there about Trump's supposedly forthcoming healthcare plan. Trump again raises this idea that COVID cases are rising merely because of more testing. He's sticking with that.
4 years ago, you were behind in the polls, as you are now, and you pulled it out. But this time you have kind of a double migraine. You have unemployment claims going up. You have COVID cases going up. I mean, it's like the gods have suddenly decided to conspire against you.
I don't think so at all, no. I think
Well,
we've
what
done a
about
great
these-
job with COVID.
Sir, excuse me, cases are up in about 40 states.
You know why cases are up also? Because we do more testing. The fake news media loves to say cases are up. The fact is we've done a very, very good job.
Cases are up.
We have done, that's right, because we're doing so much testing.
There is increased testing, but according to the COVID Tracking Project, that doesn't account for all of the rise in new cases sweeping the country or the 40% increase in hospitalizations in the past month.
Understand that this is an easily debunkable lie. Testing is up 4% over the last week. Cases are up 21%. If you want to make the case that cases are only up because testing is up, if you test 10% more and find 10% more cases, you might be able to make that argument. You might be able to make the argument that this is roughly the number of cases that was there all along. We're just testing more people and making more of those cases official. But when you test 4% more and cases go up 21% and hospitalizations are up, you understand that it's a lie. This is an existential threat. This man is an existential threat that must be removed, and he's lying to you every day. Whether he understands the math of it, probably not, but he is lying every day. And then lastly, on Trump, before we move to one Pence clip, Leslie Stahl, good for her, calls out Trump on the healthcare plan that he's been promising for months. And Trump says, we're going to announce it very, very soon.
You promised that there was going to be a new health package, a health care plan.
Yeah.
You said that it was going to be great. You said it's ready, it's going to be
will
ready,
be.
it'll be here in 2 weeks, it's going to be like nothing you've ever seen before, and of course we haven't seen it. So why didn't you develop a health plan?
It is developed. It is fully developed. It's going to be announced very soon when we see what happens with Obamacare.
If the Supreme Court ends this Obamacare,
well, we're going to have to see what happens. I hope that they end it. It'll be so good if they end it.
And if they end it, people with pre-existing conditions will be stranded.
No.
And that's just a fact.
It's wrong. It's
No.
wrong. A new plan will happen.
But will.
And we won't do anything, will and is. We won't do anything and no plan unless we have pre-existing conditions covered.
Of course, at this point, I don't know that anybody believes that this plan actually exists. Remember that in August, Donald Trump said to... There's video of Trump promising it in 2017 and 2018 and 2019. But more recently, in August, Trump said during that bizarre interview with Chris Wallace, we are going to sign a new health care bill into law in 2 weeks. And of course, it's almost November at this point. It probably doesn't exist. Here is Leslie Stahl after Trump walked out asking Vice President Mike Pence, why did Donald Trump end his interview early? Pence just has no idea how to respond. Take a look.
While our interview with the president did not go forward, the one scheduled with the vice president did.
So what just happened with the president?
Leslie, President Trump is a man who speaks his mind. I think it's one of the great strengths that he's had
But he walked
as President
out.
of the United States, is that the American people always know where they stand.
I'll buy
And
that.
he's always ready. And the American people know that in this time, it's less about the back and forth with the media, and it's really more about how we bring this country all the way back.
Why did Trump leave, Mr. Vice President? The president is always ready, Leslie. The president is always ready. An embarrassment. But remember, Trump, as a narcissist, probably can't even acknowledge or comprehend that this was an embarrassment. And in fact, Trump thought the raw, uncut video made him look good. And he released it a few days ago. I do think, despite Donald Trump's weaponized narcissism and inability to feel shame, I do think if he loses to Biden the way he might lose if we all get out and vote and the votes are counted properly, I actually do think Trump may be ashamed by losing to Joe Biden badly, because he's alluded to it. He said, can you imagine if I lost to this guy? Can you imagine if I lost to this worst candidate or whatever it is that he says? I think that will actually bring shame to Donald Trump. Just a bonus. Primary reason to vote Biden is to start righting the ship of the United States. Very far down the list, but interesting nonetheless, is Donald Trump actually being ashamed of being brutally defeated by Joe Biden. Let's make it happen. There are growing concerns among anyone who's seen recent video of the president that Donald Trump is having a major problem communicating coherently. I know that that's been a problem for years, but that it's happening even more right now. Trump has been doing rallies at a very high rate, sometimes 3 rallies in different states in one day. And the things coming out of his mouth have gone from factually wrong to straight up unintelligible. One such rally over the weekend was in Lumberton, North Carolina on Saturday, an important state where Joe Biden has a very small lead right now in the latest polls, could go either way. And here is Donald Trump talking about, I guess the wall with Mexico is the topic, but I am issuing a challenge to you. What on earth is Donald Trump saying here?
And Mexico is paying for the wall. They'd like to have you say no. Once it was complete, once they knew the wall, oh, and we can't talk about the wall anymore, then they said, listen, but Mexico's not paying for it. No, they are paying for it, so now they don't know what the hell to do. Just one of those things. They don't know what to do.
Mexico is going to pay for the wall when it's built, but because it's already built, you don't have to say it anymore. But they did pay for it. But of course, in reality, it's not been built. What is he talking about? Please let me know. What exactly is Donald Trump saying here? Another strange moment at a rally Saturday in Ohio, Trump saying Joe Biden draws flies, which is it's weird because, number one, the most notable moment from the vice presidential debate was when a fly literally landed on Mike Pence, not figuratively. There's some, religious metaphors about flies landing on you that don't mean much to me. A fly literally landed on Mike Pence. And then number two, as you'll see here, Trump actually had a fly on him during this rally. You can't write this stuff.
You don't want Sleepy Joe to be your president. You know, he draws flies. He's not drawing anybody. Tired of all of this stuff. They're tired of such negativity. Hey, by the way, I had it. Here I am. I mean, you know, here I am. It used to be that if you had it, you were immune for life, right? For life.
How strange a time are we living in? Not only that Trump is saying Biden draws flies, but that during his weekend rallies, he also had a fly on him. It's inconceivable. It almost is beyond. If this was a screenplay, you would say it's not. It's too out there. It's too cliche. We can't do it. It's not believable. Remember last week that Donald Trump cut a rally short because it was too cold for him? This time complaining that it's too hot and he's going to have to cut it short again.
Is that sun hot or what? Yeah. I'm going to be a lobster. Do you mind if I cut this one at about 1/3? Because I'm going to be one hell of a sunburned person. Does anybody have some sun protection for your president, please? This is beautiful. Oh, man. I say to my kids, stay out of the sun. Always use sunblock. Hey, always use sunblock. And here I am. That's really brilliant.
And then the president claiming that Joe Biden is the candidate of needless death, which again, it's just projection.
Biden is a candidate of endless war and needless death.
Of course, needless death. It's, Donald Needless Death Trump. It might as well be the guy's middle name. He, due to his completely failed coronavirus response, numerous respected studies pointing out many deaths that were not necessary, needless death. In this next clip, Donald Trump seems to think that this is just weird. Trump seems to think the Paris Climate Accords are in some way specific to Paris. It's really weird. Like he says, look at how Paris is doing.
And we're not in the Paris Accord. We don't feel like spending trillions of dollars and destroying our businesses, okay? How's it doing for Paris? Not so well.
Very strange. Donald Trump might be shocked to know that the Camp David Accords were not actually about circumstances at Camp David. And then as a final touch at the rally in who knows where this one even was, at this point, I can't keep it straight. Was this Florida, North Carolina, Ohio? I don't know. A guy throughout the event repeatedly flashing a white power sign with his right hand right behind Trump was noticed right away by people watching the rally. So certainly anybody watching this stuff has to understand the behavior is becoming increasingly erratic. Trump continuing to launch brutal assaults on the English language, but also on common decency and also on democracy. And now the latest is the White House seems to have formally given up on controlling the pandemic. I want to talk about that next. So Donald Trump's chief of staff, Mark Meadows, horrible guy, just a terrible person, went on CNN yesterday, was interviewed by Jake Tapper and straight up said, we're not going to control the pandemic. All hell has broken loose, although if you've been paying attention, we're 8 or 9 months in. Of course they're not going to control the pandemic. That's obvious at this point. You just wouldn't imagine that Mark Meadows would straight up say it. Check out, this is, we call him the maskless wonder, Mark Meadows, because he's known for walking around every Trump rally with no mask, hugging people, touching people, high-fiving people. He says, we're not going to control the pandemic.
So here's what we have to do. We're not going to control the pandemic. We are going to control the fact that we get vaccines, therapeutics, and other mitigation
Why aren't we going to get
areas
control of the pandemic?
Because it is a contagious virus, just like the flu.
Yeah, but why not make efforts to contain it?
Well, we are making efforts to contain it.
By running all over the country, not wearing a mask?
Jake,
that's what the vice president's doing.
We can get into the back and forth. Let me just say this. Is what we need to do is make sure that we have the proper mitigation factors, whether it's therapies or vaccines or treatments.
Now, of course, we don't have those things that Mark Meadows says we should have. But also, Mark Meadows is wrong. It can be contained. Look at the places that have contained it. Taiwan, South Korea, Japan, Slovakia. Bangladesh with a very low death rate. Australia, of course, with a very low death rate. We know it can be done in countries of varied geographical size and varied population size because they've done it. Listen to Jake Tapper here as we continue, having to treat Mark Meadows like a little kid.
To make sure that people don't die from this, but to suggest that we're going to actually quarantine all of America, lock down our economy.
No one's saying that.
Well, they are. Joe Biden's saying that. He says lock everybody down. We're going to have a dark winter. We're going to have a dark winter.
That's what health officials say. That's what health officials say, that it's going to get worse.
No,
we have the
Joe Biden's
worst days.
Jake,
let's be honest. Infections, Friday and Saturday.
Let's be honest here. The health officials did not say dark winter. Those were Joe Biden's words.
When we look at a health official, I think he was quoting William Haseltine.
When we look at the number of cases increasing, what we have to do is make sure that we fight it with therapeutics and vaccines, take proper mitigation factors in terms of social distancing and masks when we can.
So Mark Meadows there, again, listing things we should do that they are not doing. But again, anybody looking at the trend lines sees a dark winter coming. Look at the chart of cases in the United States. I'll describe it. I've marked the first two spikes and look at the trend line. We have the first red arrow here points to spike number 1, where we got to 35,000 cases a day. Then the numbers backed off a little bit. The second arrow is spike number 2 in July, 75,000 cases a day. And now we already had a record 81,000 and 79,000 cases per day on Friday and Saturday. And the trend line is going to the moon. If this were a stock chart of a stock you owned, you'd be getting ready to make a ton of money because it looks like it's going to the moon. Sadly, this is not a stock chart. This is coronavirus cases. Next, Mark Meadows tries to go after Joe Biden, hilariously.
And when we look at this, we're going to defeat it, Jake, because we're Americans. We do that. And this president is leading while Joe Biden is sitting there suggesting that we're going to mandate masks.
The president is holding rallies all over the country.
That's correct.
No
In fact,
masks,
we're leaving.
No masks required, no distancing. There have already been, according to health officials, contact tracing. There have already been cases of individuals in Minnesota and in Washington, D.C., and in Oklahoma that got the virus at these Trump rallies that Dr. Fauci himself called a super spreader event, the one at the White House.
There's also been contact tracing, Jake.
That is not leading.
There's also been contact tracing.
Imagine saying Biden is the problem because he wants a mask mandate, which, by the way, is not something a president can do unilaterally. This often isn't discussed, but a presidential mask mandate, by everything I've read from left and right wing constitutional scholars, a presidential mask mandate would be one of two things. Either the president asks all 50 governors to do a mask mandate, in which case it's states' rights, it's 50 governors saying, let's do this. Or Congress would have to pass something through the ability of the federal government to regulate commerce in states. Those are the two ways. So the idea of a unilateral presidential mask mandate is really a fantasy idea, quite frankly. Understand what it really means. But again, the fact that people are having this argument, we have a situation where people are arguing about the freedom to give the virus to other people. That's essentially what it is. Freedom to do whatever the hell I want, regardless of the consequences. And then they have to go to what Joe Biden might do after the chief of staff says we're not going to control the virus. This should be in a Biden ad immediately. Mark Meadows plainly saying, we're not going to control the pandemic. We know, Mark. We know. We're going to take a quick break. Make sure you're following us on Instagram at David Pakman Show. See what I was up to this weekend. Follow me on Instagram at david.pakman.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Congresswoman Debbie Mucarsel-Powell represents Florida's 26th district. She joins me today. Congresswoman, thanks for being on. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me, David.
The Florida vote is very, very interesting. Florida as a state may well determine who wins the presidential election, Joe Biden or Donald Trump. And then within Florida, your district may actually signal the way that the state goes. It's a very interesting district, as you've mentioned in other conversations we've had, nearly 70% Latino voters. Talk a little bit about the dynamics there in Florida. What are the most important issues to Floridians?
Well, first, let me say that you're absolutely correct. I think that the state of Florida is going to be one of the most important states in this election. The road to the White House begins in Florida, and yes, it starts in Florida's 26th district. The top issue here has been and continues to be healthcare access. I represent an area where 70% of the people that live in my district are Latinos, Hispanic, from the Hispanic community, very diverse. Ecuadorians, Colombians, Argentinians, Mexicans, many of them are Cuban Americans. And for them, during this pandemic has hit us very hard here in Miami-Dade County. We became the epicenter of COVID during the summer. And it's because of failed leadership locally and at the state level. And many people lost their jobs. They didn't have access to quality health care. And the stakes of this election have become even higher now that the Senate is trying to push for that nomination to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, as you know, is going to be hearing the lawsuit to repeal the Affordable Care Act. And in my district, David, we have the second largest number of people that get their health care through the ACA. 300,000 individuals in my district have pre-existing conditions. So if the ACA is repealed, you would see millions of Americans losing their health coverage, and so many here in my district that would lose that. And I can tell you that the energy in South Florida, it has gone up significantly in the past 2 months. People are out there, they're engaged. There are so many grassroots movements going on in South Florida. They are coming out for me. They're coming out for Biden. They understand what's at stake at this election. And because of their care, because they know who's going to protect their care, I think that the energy has really gone way above what anybody expected.
Within the American electorate, there are different groups that tend to vote one way or the other. And as a general rule, three of the most left-leaning groups are Jewish Americans, African Americans, and Latino or Hispanic Americans, generally. Within that last group, Cuban Americans tend to be the most conservative, and there seems to be this kind of reflexive anti-Castro thing that goes on and that we've seen. Can you address a little bit, your district is the perfect place, epicenter to see all of these different groups, as you mentioned, and their priorities and voting interests. Does the perspective of the Cuban American electorate seem different this time around?
Yeah. There is a group of Cuban Americans that are very much in favor of Donald Trump. And that's because there has been a lot of misinformation spread about the Democrats. They are instigating fear, saying that, accusing Democrats of being socialists, which is completely false. And for Cuban Americans and for a lot of people that have fled violent regimes in Latin America, this is scary. And they've been using that message to divide, to control that vote. But I can tell you that there's also a significant group of Cuban Americans who are 100% behind Joe Biden. They know that Donald Trump has been an ally of Vladimir Putin. And let's back up for a second. Vladimir Putin is propping up the narco regime in Venezuela, the Maduro regime. They are propping up Cuba. They're one of their top allies in Cuba. And Trump is standing right next to them. So Cuban Americans here and many Latin Americans understand that the person that they need to fear is Donald Trump, because we're seeing so many signs of someone that's trying to grab onto power, who's doing whatever he can, going towards the road of an authoritarian regime. So Cuban Americans here are now standing up and saying, no, we do not support Donald Trump. We are with Biden. There's a group called Cubanos con Biden, but there's also Ecuatorianos con Biden, Venezolanos con Biden. And that's been a grassroots movement that has started really by all the Latin Americans that are living down here that have said, enough, we're not going to follow these lies anymore. So I'm very optimistic and excited to see what's happening here in South Florida.
So should we be concerned about the safety of vote by mail? What do you see as, again, taking into consideration all of the different reasons one might vote one way or the other? What is your message to people about how it is that they should vote if they really want to feel good about feeling that their vote is likely to be counted?
What I tell everyone here is your vote is still going to be safe and secure. Do not let anyone distract you or make you think otherwise. Our systems are secure. We have been conducting oversight along with the FBI. We have been in communication with our supervisor of elections here locally. So if you need to vote by mail because of health conditions, because you're not here physically, mail that envelope today. Sign it, seal it, mail it. That's what we're saying. Just send your ballot early. If you can vote early, we start early voting October 19th. And you can do that securely as well. Wear a mask, use your hand sanitizer, but vote. Whatever the plan is for you to vote, vote. Vote in the way that's safest for you, for your family. Vote. Every vote counts. David, in 2018, I had a colleague, or one of the candidates in Texas, who lost her election by 900 votes. Gina Ortiz from Texas, who I think welcome into Congress in 2020. 900 votes. Every single vote counts. Again, if you have your ballot, mail it in, sign it, mail it in, send it. It's safe, it's secure. If you can vote in person, vote early. Don't wait until November 3rd. We have 2 weeks of early voting here in Miami-Dade and in Monroe County. We can change the direction of this country. And I have a lot of optimism because so many young people are excited, they're engaged. They're telling their parents, their abuelos, tíos, primos, primas, everyone to come out and vote. And we're going to see that. We're going to see a huge turnout in 2020.
So this is speculative. It's just your opinion. But when do you believe we will know the election results?
If we vote decisively in Florida, if we have a decisive win in Florida, that's going to be a huge indicator that Joe Biden will be our next president. If Joe Biden wins Florida, of course. That's what I'm referring to. If we don't know, it could take weeks. And so my recommendation is let all of us expect that. Don't fret. Don't get anxious about it. Let's count every single vote. That's our democracy. We can be patient. If we've waited this long, we can wait a couple of more weeks. But my hope is that Florida is so decisive for Joe Biden that will be a pretty clear indicator of who's going to take the White House in January.
Yeah, it's going to be a very, very interesting election, extremely high stakes. Congresswoman Debbie Mucarsel-Powell, representing Florida's 26th district. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you joining me today.
Thank you, David.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
So doctors are absolutely furious with Donald Trump for spreading the completely bogus conspiracy theory that doctors are inflating the number of coronavirus deaths for profit and that's why our numbers are so bad. I'm going to explain this to you and explain the genesis of this. Donald Trump has said that we only have high case numbers because we test so much. And now he's saying that we only have such high deaths, despite claiming they're low, because doctors make money by lying about the cause of death. Take a look at this clip, and then we're going to discuss it. This is from one of Trump's harebrained Saturday Corona rallies, this one in Waukesha, Wisconsin. Take a look.
You know, some countries, they report differently. If somebody's sick with a heart problem and they die of COVID, they say they died of a heart problem. If somebody's terminally ill with cancer and they have COVID, we report them. And, you know, doctors get more money and hospitals get more money. Think of this incentive. So some countries do it differently. If somebody is very sick with a bad heart, they die of COVID, they don't get reported as COVID. So then you wonder, gee, I wonder why their cases are so low. This country and their reporting systems are really not doing it right. If somebody has a really bad heart and they're close to death, even if they're not, but they have a very bad heart and they get COVID, they put it down to COVID. Other countries put it down to a heart. So we have to be. We're going to start looking at things because they have things. They have things a little bit backwards. They have things a little bit backwards. Joe Biden is made.
Seriously, if you hear Donald Trump say that and you like it and you believe it and you clap, how can you be trusted to have any job? I mean, really, short of some completely menial task with no contact with other people, how can you have a job that involves interacting with people in any way, teaching kids, being an accountant? I mean, just about any job. How could you be trusted to do anything if you believe when Trump says cause of death is being forged for doctors to profit? There are 60 million of these people, my friends. It is a living nightmare in the United States. But understand that Donald Trump has become your crazy uncle spreading fake news on Facebook. This specific conspiracy theory is one that I don't know if it started on Facebook, but it was popular on Facebook for a while. It's been around since early in the pandemic. Stuff like, if a doctor says you have COVID, they get an extra $17,000 if you die of it. Now, I do actually want to explain where this comes from, where it started, so that you're equipped to deal with it. As many of you know, hospitals are paid based on diagnosis and treatment. What do they diagnose and what do they treat? What do they do to a patient? Medicare, so again, we're talking about only people of Medicare age. Medicare pays hospitals, reimburses hospitals 20% more for coronavirus patients relative to, my guess is, a non-coronavirus sort of like flu admission, because people of Medicare age on average require more treatment, and coronavirus on average has certain protocols that cost more money, right? So it makes sense that if on average coronavirus is multiple times more deadly than the flu, and on average older folks are more likely to have a serious case than younger folks, it would make sense that when Medicare age people are admitted to a hospital for coronavirus, there's going to be more treatment provided, and that costs more money in the system that we have. That would lead to a higher reimbursement. Now, the conspiracy. First of all, there is no evidence that hospitals are fraudulently saying people have coronavirus when they don't in order to pad their revenue. That would be extremely serious insurance fraud. But most importantly, even like actually think about it, a patient dying has no impact on revenue. There is no reason to lie because Trump is talking about cause of death. There's no reason to lie about cause of death. And of course, it would be hugely immoral. And doctors groups are furious that Donald Trump is suggesting it. Rob Davidson is an emergency room doctor who's part of the Committee to Protect Medicare. He said, quote, as a doctor, this is such an insult. We report deaths how they occur. If you did your damn job, we wouldn't be reporting so many COVID-19 deaths, about 130,000 fewer, according to a Columbia University study. This is a very common thing on the right. Everything's fake. It's a smokescreen. Climate change is fake. COVID deaths are fake. And then when they explain why, it's money. Someone is lying for money, which is what they would do. This is the incredible projection that is here. When they don't want to accept a scientific reality, they assume someone must be lying in order to make money for themselves. And it's a big peek behind the curtain for Trump. He must think everyone on earth must be as terrible a person as he is. And so if he would lie for personal gain, the doctors must also be lying for personal gain. And by the way, I don't even know if we need to do this. The virus as a way to make hospitals money. Hospitals are getting crushed during coronavirus. Hospitals make money with necessary but not urgent surgeries, hip replacements, knee scopes, so on and so forth. Those are all down dramatically during the pandemic. So the idea that the virus is a hoax generated to make money for the medical industry is absurd, because when you look at the Q2 GDP decline, the leading declining industry was the healthcare industry. This has been terrible for the medical field. Healthcare has been decimated by the virus. ER visits are down, outpatient visits down, surgeries down, short and long-term care, prohibited from admitting people for months during this. A huge increase in PPE costs for the hospitals, even though they have fewer patients. It's been bad. It doesn't make any sense. We must end this insanity. Barack Obama's trying to help end it, and I want to talk about that a little bit. It has been a pleasure to watch these recent Barack Obama rallies for Joe Biden, socially distanced drive-in rallies in various parts of the country. And part of the entertainment is that Trump gets so triggered by it. On one hand, it's good to have a reminder of what it's like to have a president who speaks incomplete sentences, can articulate an idea with a beginning, middle, and an end. But Trump's triggering has been delightful. Here's Barack Obama in Miami saying we can't just say it's okay for a president to lie constantly.
We can't just say, oh, it's fine if a president lies 50 times a day. No.
Barack Obama going on to say even Florida man, the ubiquitous Florida man, wouldn't do this stuff. Why are we accepting it from the president of the United States?
Florida man wouldn't even do this stuff. Why are we accepting it from the president of the United States?
Barack Obama just laughing off the wacky claim from Trump that he's been the best president for black folks since Abe Lincoln.
And, you know, he loves talking about black unemployment. Says he's the best president for black folks since Abe Lincoln. What?
And then this one I just love, referring to the 60 Minutes interview with Leslie Stahl. Barack Obama accurately points out the acute problem with a president not even being able to sit through a tough interview.
And let me say, I've run for president in Miami, so I just want you to know it's a good idea to have an answer to this question. It's a good idea if you're running for re-election to say, here's what I want to accomplish. What did Trump say? He got mad and walked out of the interview. He thought the questions were too tough. Too tough. Miami, listen, if he can't answer a tough question like, what would you like to do in your second term? Then it's our job to make sure he doesn't get a second term. And that's why, over the next 10 days, we got to work hard to elect Joe Biden and Kamala Harris the next president and vice president of the United States.
Just very well done there by Barack Obama. One more clip for you.
And I understand the president's coming to Florida today. You think he's hard at work coming up with a plan to get us out of this mess? Well, I don't know, because I know he's had a tough week. Everybody's been very unfair to Donald Trump this week.
So again, Trump hugely triggered by this, tweeting out of control, starting to tweet as Barack Obama was doing these events for Joe Biden. Nobody's showing up for Obama's hate-laced speeches. 47 people, no energy, but still better than Joe. Retweeting nonsense about Joe Biden and Barack Obama killing the coal industry, as if that's a bad thing. It's not true, but as if it's a bad thing. And if elected, he will come after oil and gas, which we hope he absolutely will. And then also tweeting just wild, quote, just signed an order to support the workers of Delphi Corporation and make sure we protect the pensions of all American workers. Obama Biden failed American workers and failed the workers of Delphi. I always put American workers first. Trump is so jealous of Barack Obama. It's so clear, and for good reason. Barack Obama is able to coherently express political ideas. He's able to connect with people in a human way. You don't have to like his drone policy. You don't have to like his position on warrantless surveillance or whatever else. But Trump has much reason to be jealous of Barack Obama. And I love as a strategy bringing Barack Obama heavily for these last 2 to 3 weeks. You're not seeing George W. Bush out there for Donald Trump. And in fact, from what we've heard, it's quite plausible that George W. Bush is not even voting for Donald Trump. Barack Obama will be a big presence over the next 8 days. I think it's great. We'll be covering some of the events live on YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook. And I am sure that the triggering will continue for the next 8 days. We have a voicemail number. That number is 219-2-DAVID-P. Here's a caller who thinks Trump really will leave the country if he loses next week. Take a listen to this.
Hey, David. Joe from California. Hey, as you know, with everything with Trump is protection. And I think every time he now has been saying, oh, if I lose, I'll leave the country, he actually means it, because he knows he's under several state investigations, especially with the New York DA's office.
True.
And a few other things going on. So I think he knows I'm going to lose. I better leave the country, because otherwise I won't be able to pardon myself on state charges. So I'm going to leave the country. So again, it's all projection.
I talked to a few friends over the weekend, and they were saying the same thing. They're thinking Trump really will leave the country, although their thought was, not these more cartoonish, like he'll go hide out in Russia, which I just don't think that's going to happen, but more like Trump will permanently relocate to like his Scottish golf course or something like that. I think there are many countries that would love to welcome a former U.S. president who's going to criticize potentially the election system that gets his opponent elected, but we're very much getting ahead of ourselves. All we have to do now is vote. We'll deal with if and where Trump will go to live later. Let's first take care of business. On the bonus show today, Mike Pence has 5 aides, including his chief of staff, tested positive for COVID-19. Number 2, grocery stores are preparing for a second sort of buying panic as we get into rapidly climbing cases now in the fall into winter. And a Boston ballot box, much like the one I used, has been set on fire. The city putting out a message saying, if you dropped off your ballot during a certain range of times, please contact us, because it appears as though some ballots have quite literally gone up in smoke. All of those stories and more on today's bonus show. Get instant access, instant to the bonus show, by signing up at joinpacman.com. I look forward to speaking to you then and or on tomorrow's show.